The Bible. It's a collection of ancient texts, prophecies, poetry, history, and letters. It holds stories of kings, shepherds, wars, and miracles. But for many, the Bible remains an unopened mystery. Here at The Bible Explained, we're not just reading verses, we're exploring the cultural bedrock and the dramatic narrative woven through its 66 books. Hit that subscribe button and let the journey begin.
Today we're diving into one of the oldest, most powerful stories ever told. I'm talking, of course, about the tragic story of Cain and Abel from the book of Genesis. And this story, right out of the gate, forces us to ask this really unsettling question. I mean, think about it. We're just one generation away from paradise. So what happens? What could possibly turn the world's first brother into the world's first murderer? That's the huge mystery we're going to try and unpack together.
All right, so let's set the scene. Adam and Eve, they're out of the Garden of Eden, and they have their first kids, 2 sons. And these 2 boys, well, they're going to end up representing 2 completely different paths for all of humanity.
First, you've got Cain. He's a farmer, a guy who works the ground. Then there's his brother, Abel, who's a shepherd tending the flocks. And you'll want to remember their jobs because what they do for a living is going to be really important when it comes to the offerings they bring to God. And that brings us right to the moment where everything changes. Both brothers decide to come and worship. They each bring an offering, something from their own hard work. Cain brings some of his crops, and Abel brings an animal from his flock. And this one single act of worship, it becomes the spark that ignites the whole tragedy. Why? Because these 2 offerings get 2 very, very different reactions.
So first up, we're told that God has regard for Abel and his offering. It's accepted. That's a clear sign, right? The gift was pleasing to him.
But then, the gut punch. For Cain and his offering, the text says God had no regard. It's rejected. And that rejection, right there, is the spark that lights this incredible fuse of anger and jealousy.
So you have to ask, and this is the question people have been asking for thousands of years. Why? Why was one accepted and the other rejected? What was the difference? Was it about the gift itself, or was it something deeper? Something about the men who brought the gifts?
Well, over the centuries, thinkers and theologians have come up with 3 main theories to explain God's decision. So let's take a look at each one and see what we can find out.
Okay, so the arguments really boil down to 3 main possibilities. First, was it the type of sacrifice? Blood versus grain. Or maybe it was the quality. Did one brother bring his best while the other didn't? Or, and this is a big one, was it all about the heart of the person giving the gift? Was it about true faith versus just going through the motions? All right, let's really break these down because this is where it gets super interesting. Theory number 1, the type of sacrifice. Some people think God required a blood sacrifice, maybe pointing back to the animal skins he provided Adam and Eve in the garden. But there's a pretty strong counterargument. The Bible doesn't actually call this a sin offering, and we know that later on, grain offerings were totally acceptable. Okay, so what about theory number 2, the quality? Now here the text gets really specific. It says Abel brought the firstborn and the fat portions. I mean, that's his absolute best, right? But for Cain, it just says he brought some fruit of the soil. It sounds, well, a bit ordinary, doesn't it? Maybe even like leftovers. But the third theory, and honestly the one that gets the most support later in the Bible, is that it was all about the heart. This idea says that the gift itself wasn't the main point. What mattered was the attitude of the person giving it. Abel's offering was an act of genuine faith, while Cain, well, he was just kind of going through the motions.
And, the New Testament really doubles down on this. When it looks back on this story, it says flat out that it was Abel's faith that made his sacrifice more acceptable. So what does that tell us? It suggests that God wasn't just looking at what was on the altar. He was looking deep into the heart of the person who put it there.
So Cain gets rejected. How does he react? Does he show any humility? Does he try to figure out how to get it right? Nope. Instead, his pride is wounded, and this simmering anger starts to boil over, and it leads him down a really dark, destructive path. He never stops to ask, hey, what did I do wrong? Instead, he just gets completely consumed by jealousy and resentment. His pride is hurt, and that anger just starts to fester inside him. And isn't that just a perfect picture of how envy can totally poison a person from the inside out?
But even at this point, God gives Cain a chance. He gives him this incredible warning, this powerful image. He says sin is like a predator crouching at your door. He tells Cain, look, its desire is to have you, to control you, but you have to rule over it.
It's this clear call to take responsibility for his own actions.
But Cain doesn't listen. He fails to master it. And that anger that was boiling up inside him, it just explodes into violence. He actually tricks his brother, lures him out into a field, and right there, the first murder in human history happens. And as if that's not bad enough, when God confronts him, he makes it even worse by lying about it.
When God asks him, "Where is your brother Abel?" Cain's reply is one of the most infamous, chilling lines in the entire Bible. "Am I my brother's keeper?" I mean, wow. That question is just a total rejection of our most basic human duty to look out for each other. And the story's answer to that question is, of course, a loud, resounding yes. Yes, you are.
And the consequences are severe. The ground itself, the very soil that soaked up his brother's blood, is now cursed for him. He's sentenced to be a restless wanderer. But then, in this really surprising twist, God also shows him mercy. He puts a mark on Cain, not as a mark of shame, but actually to protect him. God promises that if anyone hurts Cain, they'll face an even harsher punishment.
So, when all is said and done, what's the takeaway here? Well, these two brothers leave behind two completely different legacies, and both of them still have a lot to teach us today.
On one hand, you have Abel. He's remembered as a righteous man, the very first martyr for his faith. The Bible says that even though he's gone, his faith still speaks to us. And then you have Cain. He becomes the ultimate cautionary tale, a timeless warning about what happens when pride, jealousy, and sin are allowed to take control. So at the end of the day, this ancient story really drives home one crucial truth. What we do on the outside, our acts of worship, our service, whatever, it doesn't mean much if it's not backed up by what's going on inside, by a real heart of love, devotion, and faith.
And that leaves us with a question that's just as relevant for us today. When we give of ourselves in our worship, in our work, in our relationships, are we just presenting a gift, just going through the motions? Or are we, like Abel, actually offering our whole heart?
The Bible isn't just a history book. It's a living, challenging text. As you reflect on what we covered today regarding this topic, consider how this new context changes your reading of the verses. If you appreciated this breakdown, sharing it with just one friend who struggles with understanding the Bible is the best way you can support the channel. Subscribe for more, click here for your next explanation, and never stop seeking clarity. Until next time.